History only remembers the winners, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the Gates, the Bezoses. But every era that created a billionaire also destroyed someone else. For every fortune built, there was a civilization disrupted, an industry collapsed, a class of people left behind with nothing. This is the other side of wealth history nobody teaches you. Every winner, every loser, every era, and by the end, you'll understand exactly which side of the current era you're on right now. Spice's era. Winner, the Dutch merchant class. The Dutch East India Company turned ordinary merchants into dynasties. Shareholders who invested early received annual returns of up to 40% for decades. Amsterdam became the wealthiest city on earth. Its canal houses, built entirely from spice profits, still stand today. The Dutch invented the modern stock market, modern banking, and modern corporate law, all to manage the money the spice trade was generating faster than existing systems could handle. Loser, the Spice Island populations. The islands of Banda in Indonesia produce virtually all of the world's nutmeg. When the Dutch arrived and demanded total control, the local population resisted. The Dutch response was systematic extermination. In 1621, Dutch forces killed approximately 90% of the Banda Islands population, around 15,000 people, to seize complete control of the nutmeg supply. They replaced the population with Dutch plantation owners using slave labor. The islands that grew the most valuable substance on earth were left with nothing but graves. The brutal math. Dutch shareholders earned generational wealth. The people who grew the product were eliminated for growing it. The coal and steel era. 140 to 250. Winner, the industrial capitalists. Carnegie, Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Cornelius Vanderbilt. This era produced America's first generation of super wealthy individuals. Carnegie alone gave away $350 million in his lifetime and still died rich. The families who owned the mills, the railroads, and the banks built fortunes so large that their descendants are still wealthy today, 5 generations later, without ever working a day. Loser, the industrial workers. The people who actually built the industrial era worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, in conditions that regularly killed them. Coal miners developed black lung disease from breathing coal dust their entire working lives. Steel workers operated furnaces at temperatures that caused frequent fatal accidents. Child labor was standard. Children as young as 8 worked in mines and mills because they were small enough to fit in narrow spaces adults couldn't reach. When workers organized to demand better conditions, the response was often violent. In 1892, Carnegie's steel plant in Homestead, Pennsylvania hired 300 armed private guards to break a workers' strike. 7 workers were killed. Carnegie was vacationing in Scotland at the time. The brutal math. The men who built the railroads died poor. The man who owned the railroad died the richest person on earth. The oil era, 250 to 405. Winner, the Texas dynasties in Gulf royalty. Spindletop in Texas created hundreds of instant millionaires overnight. The families who moved fast, acquiring land, drilling rights, and refinery capacity before price of entry rose, built fortunes that funded political careers, universities, and media empires for generations. Meanwhile, the Saudi royal family's decision to nationalize their oil industry in the 1970s transferred trillions of dollars from Western oil companies into state coffers. The sovereign wealth funds built from that decision are still among the largest pools of capital on earth today. Loser, oil-rich nations that sign bad deals. Not every oil-rich country captured its own wealth. Nations that signed extraction agreements during periods of colonial control or political weakness handed the majority of their oil revenue to foreign corporations for decades. The resource sat beneath their ground. The profit left on foreign ships. When some nations attempted to renegotiate or nationalize, as Iran did in 1953 under Prime Minister Mossadegh, Western governments intervened directly, removing elected leaders and reinstating governments more favorable to foreign oil interests. The oil stayed. The money didn't. The brutal math. 2 countries could sit on identical oil reserves. One ends up with a sovereign wealth fund. The other ends up with debt. The difference was entirely in who wrote the original contract. The technology era, 405 to 520. Winner, platform founders and early investors. The technology era created wealth faster than any previous era in history. Peter Thiel invested $500,000 in Facebook in 2004. When Facebook went public in 2012, the stake was worth over $1 billion. Early Amazon employees who received stock options became millionaires without founding anything. The pattern repeated across Google, Apple, Microsoft, and every major platform. Proximity to the founding moment was worth more than decades of traditional career building. Loser. Every industry the platforms disrupted. Blockbuster employed 84,000 people at its peak. Netflix destroyed it in less than a decade. Kodak invented the digital camera, failed to commercialize it aggressively, and went bankrupt, taking 145,000 jobs with it. Taxi industries that took generations to build were dismantled by Uber in cities around the world within years. Retail employees by the millions lost jobs as Amazon systematically captured their industry. Newspapers that had existed for over a century collapsed as Google absorbed their advertising revenue without producing a single article. The technology era didn't just create winners. It industrially eliminated entire categories of work that millions of ordinary people had built their lives around. The brutal math. Every platform that made a founder a billionaire eliminated thousands of jobs that will never come back. The AI era, 520 to 640. Winner, AI infrastructure owners. NVIDIA's Jensen Huang is the clearest winner of the current era so far. His company makes the chips that every AI system runs on, and every company building AI needs them so urgently that customers have waited over a year on wait lists just to purchase them. Microsoft invested $13 billion into OpenAI and embedded its technology across every Microsoft product used by 1 billion people. Google, Amazon, and Meta are spending hundreds of billions building the data centers, cables, and computing infrastructure that the AI era runs on. The shovel sellers of this gold rush are already extraordinarily wealthy, and the gold rush is barely 3 years old. Loser. Knowledge workers who spent decades building expertise. For the first time in history, a wealth era is specifically targeting skilled workers rather than manual laborers. Previous eras displaced factory workers and miners. The AI era is displacing lawyers, accountants, journalists, designers, programmers, customer service professionals, and medical diagnosticians. A junior lawyer who spent 3 years and $200,000 on a law degree can now be replaced for tasks that previously justified their salary by a system costing pennies per query. The entry-level positions that once allowed people to gain experience and climb a professional ladder are disappearing before the ladder itself has been replaced with anything. The brutal math. This era's losers are not unskilled workers. They are precisely the people who did everything society told them to do. Studied hard, specialized deeply, built expertise, and are now watching that expertise become a commodity. 5 eras. The same pattern every single time. The winner is always the person who built the system, the route, the infrastructure, the platform, the chip that everyone else depended on. The loser is always the person closest to the actual resource or the actual work. The spice grower, the coal miner, the factory worker, the taxi driver, the junior lawyer. Here is what makes this moment different from every previous era. In the spice era, the losers didn't know what was happening until it was over. In the industrial era, workers had no way to see the system being built above them. In the oil era, entire nations signed away their future because they didn't understand what they were signing. Today, the system being built above us is visible in real time. The companies building it are publicly traded. The research papers explaining it are publicly available. The people writing the rules are giving interviews and publishing their intentions openly. Every era in history rewarded the people who understood what was happening early enough to act. This is the first era where that information is available to almost everyone. The winners and losers of the AI era haven't been decided yet. That decision is still being made, right now, by the people paying attention.